Hello, Misfits. This is Kate.
And this is Kevin.
Welcome to Horrorwood at the Holidays.
Horrorwood at the Holidays.
Da 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 da. That's not even a Christmas carol. I don't know what that was.
Have you been watching Hallmark movies?
No.
I haven't either. What is going on this season?
Well, I will say, for one, I'm not a super big Hallmark Christmas movie person anymore, unless it has Lacey Chabert in it. Thanksgiving was so late this year, and then Christmas is here, and there just wasn't a lot of time in between to get things done. So I think that's part of it, because I haven't really watched a ton of Christmas movies.
I haven't either. Spencer and I watched last night A Muppet Christmas Carol, which is basically my favorite Christmas movie. We watched the full version that has the song they cut out, which is Belle's song, and you can watch it on Disney Plus.
Well, I'm happy for you. That sounds like
Thank
a lovely
you.
evening.
Fantastic.
You know what else is fantastic?
What?
We have a new Patronian.
New Patronian.
Her name is Lisa Carmichael. She's a Misfit Murderino. Thank you so much, Lisa. What a great little thing to pop up on our phones right
Lisa.
here before the holidays.
We love it.
Speaking of people named Lisa, have you watched the Lisa Frank documentary?
You text me about this, Kate. I have not watched it.
Oh my God.
I don't know the full scope, and I'm so glad they did a full documentary. 'Cause
Yeah.
The article I read a couple years ago was great, but...
Was it the Jezebel article?
The Jezebel article.
Okay, it's largely based on that. And so
Okay.
that journalist kind of spearheads this documentary.
Story. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, because I remember that article coming out, and all us millennials were on social media holy shit. Because it's insane.
Oh, I thought about you the entire time I watched it. It is harrowing.
Yeah.
That company is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And she's not a good person.
No, and I know this, and... It's that thing that we all have to deal with, which is the art versus the person.
But she's not even the artist.
No, but that's true. But I still love Lisa Frank.
I know you do. You know what I'm loving right now?
I love Lisa Frank, the brand.
Right.
Not Lisa
No,
Frank.
I got you. I got you.
You see what I mean?
You know what I'm loving right now?
What?
Myrtle. Have you done it yet?
Oh, I haven't done it yet.
I just found out about Myrtle because it's literally on every list of... Here are the best Christmas gifts to give this season, because it's books, but there's also a website, and it's like your daily Wordle, only it's Myrtle. And it's logic games, which I love. You know, when they have the boxes and you have to check. That's what it is, but it's all fun little crime cases with, fun characters and all that kind of stuff. This is not an ad. This is just
I was going to
me.
say it sounds like...
I realized that.
Is Kate reading a script?
This is not an ad. It's just me expressing my love for Myrtle. Also, I've dropped many hints to Matt, so I'm hoping he gets me the books for Christmas. Yeah. But I don't think he picked up on it, but we'll see. And you know what would be an amazing gift for us? Is if everyone listening right now went on whatever platform that they're listening on and just gave us a 5-star review and or 5-star rating. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, write us a little review. Let us know what you think of the show if you like it.
Yeah.
It really does help us out, and that'd be a great way to close out 2024.
It'd be amazing. We really want more people to be listening, and we want to grow our audience and bring it around. And so you already being a dedicated listener, thank you so much. But if you can just take a second and give us that quick boost, we would love it.
Speaking of the holidays, similar to our Home Alone episode last year and that we just reran, I wanted to bring you all an episode on yet another holiday classic. Today we're talking about a film that in 2012 Complex magazine called one of the 50 most racist movies ever made.
Happy holidays. Racism
and Gremlins. You've seen Gremlins,
Oh
right?
my God. Yes, of course.
Okay, I assumed. Do you remember the 3 rules when it comes to caring for a mogwai?
It can't see light. You can't get it wet, and you can't feed it after midnight.
And that's the most important rule, which you can never forget.
Right.
Despite being a Christmas movie, Gremlins came out in the summer, 40 years ago in June of 1984.
40 years ago?
Isn't that bananas?
Are we decrepit? Are we
I am,
ancient
for
mummies
sure.
that lived through the Sumerian, whatever?
You weren't even alive when this
I
came
know.
out. It was written by Chris Columbus, who would go on to direct Home Alone a few years later. So it's all connected. And a lot of other things.
He's amazing.
At the time, Chris was a young guy in his early 20s who was getting some recognition as a writer, but his career was still in its infancy. He sold his first screenplay when he was just a sophomore at NYU Film School.
Fuck.
Right?
I mean, and then he put a whole class to shame.
When I was a sophomore in college, I was drinking and going to parties and whining about a guy who did not like me back.
I was stalking a guy who I wanted to like me. I went too far. I'm sorry to that man.
Oh,
as
yikes.
Kiki Palmer would say.
Sorry to
that
man.
man.
That screenplay ended up not getting made, but it shows you he definitely had some talent.
Yeah, I mean, if the execs are looking at that and being yeah, definitely.
Like they see something in it. His first script that did get made was a film called Reckless, which was actor Aidan Quinn's film debut, Jennifer Grey's film debut, and James Foley's directorial debut. But Chris Columbus later disowned the film because he said it was altered so much from what he wrote. On the podcast The Movie Crypt, he said that James Foley, the director, had banned him from the set and destroyed his material, and Chris said he cried after the first screening.
No.
Which that would suck if that's like your first project and it gets made and you're like, oh my God, it's like a big Hollywood film and it's got all this amazing talent working on it, and then you watch it and it's like not
nothing.
at all what you created.
That's a horrible experience.
But still, he's selling scripts, he's getting his name out there. It's the early 80s, and Chris is sitting in his rundown apartment in New York, probably infested with cockroaches, definitely infested with mice. He's watching a lot of Universal horror films on TV.
Yes.
Think Dracula,
Yes.
Frankenstein, The Mummy. And before he falls asleep at night, he's thinking, what should I write about next? And as he's lying there, a couple of mice come scurrying across the floor and brush up against his hand as it's hanging over the bed.
I think mice are cute. And when I was in kindergarten, I read a poem at my kindergarten graduation called I Think Mice Are Nice.
You've discussed this.
I've talked about this, and I'm going to say it again
Please
just for the new people. If you want me to read that, Patreon exclusive. I'll recite it for you with my little kindergarten pin from the Montessori.
Do you still have that pin?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's in my memory book.
Oh, wow.
But they will poop everywhere, and you can catch hantavirus, which is not good for you.
Yikes. Well, because of those horrible things, Chris was pretty creeped out by the mice.
Okay.
But he was fresh out of college. It's New York. This rundown apartment is all he can afford.
You work with what you have.
Exactly. So he's hanging out with a friend one day, and his friend says, dude, you love monster movies. You're always watching them on TV. Why don't you just write one? And Chris says, I think I'll do just that. And he says it was the thought of the mice running around his apartment at night that gave him the idea of Gremlins, these cute but mischievous creatures that could wreak havoc. And when Chris's script serendipitously landed in the hands of none other than Steven Spielberg, the prolific director and producer saw the title and thought, well, this could be interesting. But Gremlins wasn't a new concept. Chris Columbus did not invent Gremlins. And this wasn't even the first Gremlins film someone had tried to make. 40 years before Chris Columbus wrote his screenplay, another young up-and-coming writer in his 20s wrote a short story called Gremlin Lore. And that man was Roald Dahl.
Oh, shit.
I'm going to do a whole episode on Dahl at some point because damn. Piece of work, that one.
Yes. I need to take a sip of this latte.
I'm going to take a sip of my cinnamon horchata protein shake.
These lattes, it's starting. I feel it.
I can see it in your eyes.
I feel it. I just rise out of the chair.
I'm like a phoenix from the ashes.
My feet no longer hurt.
Everything's healed.
Everything's better.
Espresso does make everything better. Dahl would, of course, go on to write Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, the BFG, which Spielberg would direct in 2016, and many others. But before becoming a famous author, he was a fighter pilot for the Royal Air Force. In the beginning of 1942, Dahl, who was 25 years old at the time, had just been relieved of his duties as a pilot due to injuries he sustained in a plane crash where he fractured his skull.
Holy fuck.
Sounded gnarly. His new assignment was working for the British Embassy in Washington, D.C., so basically a desk job.
Maybe that head injury opened up the creative world that we know today.
Or just made him a complete asshole.
It can go either way.
Really can. And in the 2 weeks he spent in the convoy crossing the Atlantic Ocean on his way to his new job in Washington, D.C., he made friends with another RAF pilot, Douglas Bisgood. Bisgood and Dahl passed the time swapping war stories, talking about their experiences in the air, and this included their run-ins with gremlins. One of the earliest mentions of gremlins comes in 1917.
Holy shit. Are you going to talk about the World War II Gremlins?
Yep.
There's a movie about this that everybody listening should go watch on Hulu called Shadow in the Cloud with Chloe Grace Moretz.
I love her.
I love this lore.
I'm excited for it.
I'm so happy you're talking about it.
That
Merry
espresso
Christmas
has hit.
to all and all to the Gremlins.
So one of the earliest mentions of gremlins comes in 1917 in a British newspaper called The Spectator, when the Royal Naval Air Force claimed to be plagued by the malicious creatures whose sole purpose was to cause trouble for pilots. The following year, the Royal Air Force made the same claim. Soon, British pilots started blaming gremlins for everything that went wrong. If the pilot crashed a plane, it was because the tiny creatures had been messing with the flight controls or had caused an engine failure. If the plane was low on fuel, it was because gremlins had sucked it out of the tanks. You know, like one does.
I mean, I see it all the time.
Pilots claimed they actually saw these goblin-like creatures sitting on the wings of an aircraft, drilling holes into it or trying to distract the crew. Even Charles Lindbergh stated in his book, The Spirit of St. Louis, that he saw the gremlins with his own eyes, claiming that in his 1927 flight from New York to Paris, the strange-looking beings surrounded him inside the aircraft and even conversed with him about flight equipment.
Is that the same Charles Lindbergh with the Lindbergh baby situation?
With that situation, yes.
Because I don't trust that man.
He said, quote, "I saw them plain as day, transparent forms that moved freely about. They looked grim and menacing, but I never once felt frightened." Reports vary on what these gremlins look like, but the general consensus is that they appear elf-like or goblin-like and can sometimes look reptilian with scales and claws. They're small, usually about a foot high at most, and are able to use their claws to hang on to a plane while in flight, while others say they wear boots with suction cups on the soles that helps them stick to the plane's wings.
Bitch, those is hawks or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's birds. They're seeing wild shit, and they're making up stories.
Legend has it that gremlins were skilled craftsmen, Kevin.
Oh my God.
And mechanics who felt betrayed by mankind, and so they seek revenge by causing trouble. There are a couple of different stories about the origin of the name gremlin. Some believe it's derived from the Old English word greme, probably saying that wrong, meaning to vex or annoy, while the RAF pilots claim the name actually comes from a brand of beer that was popular at the time called Fremlins.
What are you doing up in the sky?
Drinking beer and
seeing shit?
Once World War II rolled around, stories of gremlins really ramped up among pilots, so much so that the British Air Ministry began investigating and even assigned Officer Percy Prune, because of course that's your name, a self-proclaimed, most likely, gremlorist or gremlinologist, to write up a service manual on how to keep the gremlins at bay.
Stop it.
I won't.
Can you still read this? Can we get
I tried
a
to
copy?
find it. I couldn't find it, but it's out there somewhere.
It's got to be in a museum
Probably.
about World War II.
Yeah.
Probably in the catalogs where people are like...
In the catalogs. Look to the catalogs.
The
It's in there.
Western catalogs.
Look to the Western catalogs. They even made posters warning pilots against these goblin-like creatures. They took the matter of gremlins seriously.
Wow.
You've got grown men swearing up and down that they've actually seen the creatures. But one logical explanation for pilots seeing gremlins could be the effects of hypoxia, which is an inadequate supply of oxygen in the body's tissues, which can occur at high altitudes in enclosed spaces that don't have enough ventilation. And in World War II, pressurization was in the early stages, so most military planes were not pressurized.
Yeah.
Pilots had to rely on oxygen masks at high altitudes. And during the war, those planes were being manufactured so quickly that having something malfunction was not unlikely. So while the idea of tiny goblins that suction themselves to airplanes and drill holes in the wings to try to make them crash might seem a little far-fetched to some, gremlins were essentially used as a scapegoat for human error or something malfunctioning.
Yes, I can see this happening. And it's already in their minds. You
Exactly.
know, because like one guy was probably like, wow, what's
The
the little
stories
creatures?
build.
And then it's on everybody's mind. And then the pressure drops and they go crazy.
And they're drinking
like,
beer, they're getting drunk,
what
and
are
they
those
can't
creatures?
breathe.
Let's talk to them. Ooh, they're menacing.
Just don't tell that to Roald Dahl. Don't tell him that they're fake.
Well, he's dead now, right?
Yes. Roald will tell you he saw the gremlins with his own eyes.
Uh-huh.
While Roald was at his new job in D.C., he suffered from headaches as a result of that plane crash. So he decided to write a short story about gremlins to take his mind off the pain. I don't know how writing would help with a headache. That's the last thing I would want to do if I had a headache.
And I imagine he's like typewritering.
He's probably typewritering.
And that's going to help a headache. Clack, 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 clack.
Ding!
Gremlins.
Nevertheless, it was then that Dahl wrote Gremlin lore, which would later be called The Gremlins.
Okay.
At this point, Dahl only had one other writing piece published, which appeared in the Saturday Evening Post. And because he was an active officer, anything that he wanted to get published had to be submitted to the British Information Services, or BIS, for approval. Isn't that wild?
That's crazy. That's not anything like a civilian is going to have to do.
No, it's because he was an active service member.
Serviceman. It has to go through the service
Yeah.
and then to the public.
Exactly. They've got to approve it. Dahl sent his manuscript to Sidney Bernstein at the BIS. In his pre-war days, Bernstein had been a film entrepreneur. He co-founded the London Film Society. He built dozens of movie theaters. He was lifelong friends with Alfred Hitchcock. And later in life, he was honored by Queen Elizabeth, Big Liz, as well as the British Film Institute for his contributions to British television. So he was a big deal.
That's crazy.
And when he read Dahl's manuscript, he thought, I know just the person that would be interested in this story. Walt Disney.
Oh my God, all the key players.
Big ones.
Biggins.
All of this information I have on Dahl and the stuff I'm about to go into with Disney's Gremlins is from a book I read by Jim Korkis titled Gremlin Trouble, the cursed Roald Dahl film Disney never made.
Wow.
I came across it this past week while I was researching, and I was like, do I have time to read this? Thankfully, it's a pretty quick read, so I was able to get it in, and he includes all the letters back and forth between Dahl and Disney, which reveal a lot about Roald Dahl, I will say.
Oh,
it's really
juicy.
interesting. The Gremlins is Dahl's first published book, and Disney saw it as an opportunity. At the time, Disney was in an agreement to make military training films without profit for the war effort, which put the studio in huge debt.
Right.
And also, they were just really boring to make.
Yeah.
So if he were to make a feature film out of the Gremlins, it would be a way to utilize the studio's military knowledge because they had learned a lot making the training films. And this was going to be a military war film because these are gremlins that affect fighter pilots.
Yes.
And it would give Disney a chance to do something a little more creative and recapture some of the success he'd experienced with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh, he was obsessed with that shit.
Snow White came out just a few years prior in 1937 and is the first full-length animated feature film. There are other animated features prior to Snow White, but they use cardboard cutouts and stop-motion techniques. Snow White is the first fully animated feature-length film. So Walt contacts Dahl. And the next thing you know, Dahl is given 3 weeks leave from the embassy to go out to Hollywood. He's in his mid-20s. He's only had one other thing published in his life, and suddenly one of the biggest names in entertainment is interested in his story. Is this sounding familiar? Disney treated Dahl like a king. He put him up in the luxurious Beverly Hills Hotel, loaned him a fancy car to use while there, and on his very first night in town, threw him a huge party with celebrity guests including Charlie Chaplin and Spencer Tracy. They even played a game where these very distinguished actors, these stars, had to act out their interpretation of a gremlin. Charlie Chaplin won.
What would your...
I thought you were getting ready to do your interpretation.
What would your interpretation be?
Well, since I can't really get up to move around, I'll just do it here. So it's... Might cut that.
No, don't. Mine would be...
That espresso has hit.
Some light improv.
While there in Hollywood, Dahl had his very first, but not last, Hollywood affair with model and actress Phyllis Brooks, who at one time was engaged to Cary Grant. So
What the fuck?
What? In that same trip, he also supposedly hooked up with Ginger Rogers and Marlene Dietrich. So he was busy.
Was he a handsome man?
He was so attractive. Everybody loved him.
It's always the hot ones.
Yeah, needless to say, he's living his high life, and it didn't take long for all of that attention to quickly go to his head.
Of course it did.
At the Disney studio, he was looked at as this dashing war hero, and he played the part. He was charming. Women loved him. He was 6'6". At that age, he was hot. As he got a little bit older, debatable. Dahl worked closely with Disney to develop the story, which included the characters of Gremlin Gus and Jamface.
Jamface.
That was one of the characters. He wrote new words no one had heard of before. Flipperty Gibbets and Widget. And while he didn't claim to have created the term gremlin, because that had been in use for years already, his story, The Gremlins, was looked at as really creative. I mean, Walt Disney wanted to make it into a movie. It's a big deal.
It's very imaginative.
But as the project progressed, it seemed like the team kept running into roadblocks. Walt had been pursuing writer Eric Knight to work on the project with Dahl and help focus in the story because it needed some work. But Knight died in a plane crash at the beginning of 1943.
Topical.
Several animators worked on the film, but no one could ever agree on what a gremlin should look like in the style of Disney, because that Disney style is very specific.
Very specific.
And Dahl is thinking of them similar to the dwarfs in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So he's kind of coming at it from that angle, but no one could really agree on what they should actually appear as.
Right.
And Dahl was often getting in the way, trying to give notes on what they should look like. The design that would eventually become the Disney Gremlin was done by animator Bill Justice. Because this was a war project, essentially, the Air Ministry, at the encouragement of Roald Dahl, insisted that the Royal Air Force have the power to veto any idea about the film that they didn't like.
And this is how you fuck a movie.
Exactly. Walt, of course, didn't love this, but all the profits from any merchandise sold and promos were going to go to the RAF Benevolent Fund. And because of that, Walt was willing to give them some creative power because he wanted to play nice. And in his view, it was going to help the war effort.
I see.
Dahl wrote to his mother about this, which I'm going to read. It tells you everything you need to know about how Dahl viewed himself.
Oh, God.
He says, quote, "It gives me full power to disapprove of any part of the film at any stage of its production. I don't know how many $1 million Walt might spend on making the film, and if I still don't like it, I can just say, stuff it up, and he has to."
This tall drink a bitch.
That's amazing. Dahl then delayed signing the contract for the film, mainly just as a power move to show that he could. So that also held things up, although he did eventually sign. But he started giving interviews left and right that really undermined Disney. He told the Washington Daily News, quote, "Disney has tried 12 times to draw the right picture and hasn't gotten it yet, but it'll come." This is a no-name writer who doesn't have much of a resume yet, telling the press Disney just really doesn't have it when it comes to drawing.
You can't do that.
He did it. Then he told the Los Angeles Times, quote, "I come onto the Disney lot with very definite ideas about the appearance of gremlins. Their makeup is not to be left to the imagination of Disney artists."
No.
Dahl.
Honey pie.
That ain't it.
Step back. Step it back.
He really got in his own way. And everybody else's way. For that
and
matter.
literally too.
Disney wanted to promote the Gremlins to help establish copyright, which is kind of their typical channel. So they start like putting it out there to show like, hey, we're using this image. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways he did that was to have them appear in a Lifesavers ad. Lifesavers were a popular candy during the war because they could be shipped to the troops without melting in the heat like chocolate did. So during the war, the Lifesavers company shipped 23 million boxes of the candy to the troops. Isn't that wild?
I want Lifesavers now.
Right?
Lifesavers for you, Kate. Fan or no?
I don't crave them, but I'll take one if it's offered.
Gummy or hard?
Both.
I'm a gummy.
I go both.
Both ways.
I like to swing for both of them.
Kate, in the Lifesaver realm, Kate goes both ways. It's a weird thing to say. I'm so sorry.
Maybe next time just one espresso pod.
Alrighty.
Having the Gremlins appear in the ad was meant to help get the public excited about the upcoming film. Mm-hmm. But guess who wasn't excited about the ad?
Disney.
No, Dahl.
Oh, Dahl, right.
Dahl wrote to Disney and said, quote, "I nearly fell off my chair when I opened Look magazine this morning and saw the Lifesaver advertisement with our Gremlins in it."
Right. Immediately, I forgot about the Lifesaver conversation. Immediately.
Wow. He says, "I was horrified not only because the Gremlins were being completely misrepresented, but also because I could see you destroying, in the eyes of the public, the legend around which you are going to build your film and upon which the success of the whole movie will depend." Roald Dahl was clueless. He did not understand marketing. He did not understand the entertainment industry.
Nightmare.
And he just kept pushing back at everything Disney tried to do, criticizing the animation, trying to tell Disney how to do his job. There was so much back and forth between the two, and the only reason Disney put up with it as long as he did is because, one, it was going to benefit the war effort, and two, he thought it could help get the company above water financially because they were sinking.
Right.
But each step forward, Dahl sent a letter that pushed them 2 steps back. And then Disney received a very interesting letter. Only this one wasn't from Dahl. It was from Douglas Bisgood, the guy Dahl had spent time with in the convoy on his way to Washington, D.C. Douglas informed Disney that the Gremlin story was his and that he was actually writing his own book. The plot of Dahl's book was the same as the story Douglas had shared with Dahl during that 2-week period. And even the made-up names like Widget and Flibbertigibbet, those were family names that Douglas and his family used with each other. And the main character of Dahl's book, Gus is what Douglas's comrades called him. Another character in Dahl's book, Jam Face, that was the nickname of one of Douglas's friends. Roald Dahl couldn't even be bothered to change the names of the characters. So Disney writes to Dahl and is like, what's this now? And Dahl responded with, "Oh, yeah. I know Douglas, but you shouldn't take anything he says too seriously." These letters are all published in the book, so you can go and read them.
Did you buy this book?
Yeah, on Kindle, so it's on my computer. So I can't loan it to you, sorry.
Okay.
I didn't mean for that to be like... Sorry, I had a hair on my nose.
Yeah, just the way you said that. And you're like, gremlining over here.
Disney wrote back to Douglas Biscoe saying Dahl had presented the story as a collection of stories he'd heard from RAF pilots, which wasn't exactly true. He presented it as his own.
Yeah.
And told him that all the proceeds are going to the RAF Benevolent Fund. So don't worry, Mr. Biscoe. It's all for the benefit of the RAF, and you can rest assured knowing you made a contribution. So Douglas didn't fight it, probably because he thought, well, Dahl's not making money off of it, and the money's going to the Benevolent Fund. But it made him sad. And years later, after this book by Jim Korkis came out, Douglas's son Michael wrote Korkis and told him that his dad always regretted sharing those stories with Dahl because he ripped them off and started a career with them with no credit given to Douglas.
None whatsoever.
None. And they're like, Michael, the son, has pictures and albums of those names being used within their family years before he even met Dahl.
Oh,
so
shit.
like
So he's got
there's proof. Yeah.
He has receipts.
He has the receipts. In later years, Dahl started claiming that he alone had invented not only the term gremlins, but the very concept, which was not the case. And even when interviewers would remind him that the idea of gremlins had been around long before Dahl was even old enough to walk and had been printed in publications before Dahl's time, he would adamantly correct them, stating, no, I invented them.
Ew. What a bitch.
What a tall drink of bitch.
What a tall drink of bitch.
From Disney's point of view, things were getting really messy at this point, and Dahl was a pain in the ass to work with, so he started having his brother Roy deal with him. And soon it was the general consensus that people were getting tired of war movies. Because of this and all the setbacks they faced, Disney's Gremlins was never made. However, several iterations of Gremlin stories have made it to the screen, including 2 Warner Brothers animated shorts, a 1963 episode of The Twilight Zone titled Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, and then again as one of the segments in 1983's Twilight Zone the movie, produced by Steven Spielberg.
I love that Twilight episode, the 60s one. It's one of the like top memorable ones.
So when Spielberg was leaving his office one day and happened to see a script on his assistant's desk titled Gremlins, he thought, what's this?
Hey.
He takes the script and tucks it away with his things and heads out, and then spent the weekend at home reading it over. And 3 days later, he called up Chris Columbus. If you've not seen the movie, a white man, played by country singer Hoyt Axton, walks into a stereotypical, mystical Chinese shop and spots a strange-looking creature called a mogwai, which is a Cantonese word that translates to evil spirit. The white man says, I want this guy. How much? The Chinese shop owner, played by Key Luke, says he's not for sale. The white guy says, but I want him. The Chinese guy says no. The Chinese man's grandson gets excited about that cash and is like, I'll sell him to you. Just follow these rules. No bright lights, don't get him wet, and never feed him after midnight. The white man says thanks, pays for the mogwai, then gives him to his son as a gift. 2 of the rules are immediately broken, and the mogwai spawns a bunch of murderous offspring who destroy the town until they're all blown up in a movie theater, with the exception of Stripe when he's killed by being exposed to light. Yeah. That's the movie.
Good synopsis, Kate.
Thanks.
Damn.
Chris's original script was real dark. It was straight up horror.
Yeah.
Gizmo, the cute little mogwai that we tend to think of when we think of Gremlins, was supposed to turn into the evil character Stripe about 25 minutes into the movie. And there were some pretty dark scenes. Barney, the dog, whose real name is Mushroom, in case anyone's wondering, he's killed. Billy's mom, Billy is the protagonist, she gets killed and decapitated and her head comes tumbling down the stairs. There's a scene where Billy, played by Zach Galligan, and Kate, played by Phoebe Cates, walk into a McDonald's and all the customers have been eaten by gremlins. Yeah. Chris Columbus was thinking of it as an R-rated horror movie.
Yeah. That's not what the movie is, but there are some really dark...
Oh, for sure.
Then when I first saw it, I was like, what? Because I had always thought, Gremlins is like this classic that everybody loves, especially around Christmas time. And it's this like, family movie.
Right.
It's not really a family movie.
Exactly. It is not a family movie. Spielberg told Chris, hey, I want to make your movie, but let's make it for a wider audience. Because right now it's real scary. And I do want it to be a bit more family friendly. He was going for a PG rating as opposed to R.
Yeah.
Spielberg had been looking for a horror movie for his newly established Amblin Entertainment Company. And having just done E.T., the creature-centric Gremlins felt like the right fit.
Good.
Spielberg, who served as executive producer, hired director Joe Dante and producer Michael Fennell. They took it to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers was like, sweet, yeah, we'd love to have a Spielberg film. But the studio didn't really understand what this movie was. They were like, we don't get this, but we do want some of that sweet, sweet Spielberg success. So sure, we'll take it on.
Money, money, money.
Around the Warner Brothers lot, though, people had another name for Gremlins. Spielberg's Folly. They did not take the project seriously.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. Columbia was making Ghostbusters at the exact same time, and that was the movie getting all the attention. It had the big stars. It had a huge budget. No one cared about this weird movie by this unknown writer.
Yeah.
Lucy Fisher, who was the executive vice president of production at Warner Brothers, acted as the liaison between the studio and the film crew. But similar to the problems Disney had with Gremlins, the 1984 film ran into one issue after another. Lucy Fisher was constantly getting pushback from the guy in charge of business affairs at Warner's. She said he and she were at odds about every single thing, very much like Dahl and Disney.
Yeah.
For example, the rule for caring for a mogwai. He said, what do you mean you can't feed them after midnight? What if it's 6 a.m.? Is that after midnight? I don't understand. And Lucy was like, dude, you don't have to. Although it is a fair question.
It makes me angry sometimes that people can't suspend their disbelief.
Sure.
In storytelling. Like, well, that's not real.
Right.
Gremlin.
Gremlins
You're
aren't
watching
real.
a movie about gremlins.
Exactly.
And you need things to be realistic?
Exactly. Because originally they wanted to shoot this thing like on actual streets. And they were like, no. Gremlins should not be in a real environment. Like, we'll put them on a back lot of a studio. Like, you can't have this world exist. Like, it doesn't. You have to adhere to what this is.
Right. You start with the, like the titular characters and then build around that.
So next they brought in designer Chris Walas to actually create the Gremlins. But similar to Disney's Gremlins, production had trouble deciding on what they should actually look like. In Columbus's original script, they were the size of a hamster because he's thinking of them as the mice in his apartment. Then at one point, production decided to make them 4 feet tall, which would have been huge.
Now, that's a version I'm into.
But Chris Walas decided to base the look of the gremlin on the tarsier, which is one of the world's smallest primates found in Southeast Asia. And if you look up a picture of a tarsier, you'll go, oh yeah, that's totally a gremlin. They've got the big eyes and everything. Kevin is looking it up right now.
Because I love animals like this.
You're going to love it. He's so cute. Yes.
They're related to lemurs, and they're about the size of a tennis ball. You guys. I want one.
I'll get you one for Christmas.
Have you ever seen the Slow Loris?
No.
Oh.
Is that an animal or a movie?
It reminds me.
It sounds like a movie. It's an animal. The Slow Loris?
It's a Slow Loris. Yeah. And it's this, it looks like a tarsier, like the eyes and everything, but it's like much bigger.
Oh, wow.
Not huge.
Sure.
But I've seen videos of them, like someone stroking their tummy, and it always has its eyes open, and it's like...
Kevin, I wish this was on video.
If you want to see me reenact a Slow Loris and read the mice, I think mice are nice. Subscribe to Patreon.
Join the Patreon and he'll do it for you. So okay, easy. Those are all the Christmas presents.
No, I'm so sorry. Forgot they were there.
Oh my goodness. So he's basing it on this primate. Yeah. But if you think back to the Gremlins, the RAF pilots claim to see the design of the movie creatures are very similar to what the pilots used to describe.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. Joe Dante once said he read Roald Dahl's book before he started work on the film, but then later made no mention of it and distanced himself from that book as much as possible, probably for legal reasons.
Yes,
he was like, no, our Gremlins have nothing to do with Dahl's book or Disney's version. It's totally different. And as far as I can tell, Chris Columbus has never mentioned the Dahl book in relation to his script. Dante might have denied taking inspiration from the Roald Dahl book, but said he did take a lot from the holiday classic It's a Wonderful Life. the story is set in Kingston Falls as a nod to Bedford Falls and It's a Wonderful Life. And that is literally the only similarity that I can find. But Dante says that he pulled a lot from that movie.
I was going to say, like, where?
Yeah, I don't really see the similarities. But Dante's like, no, it's a wonderful life, you guys.
Gremlins is a modern day interpretation.
And it was shot both on the backlot. What am I called? What the fuck? The movie was shot both on the backlot of Warner Brothers as well as in Courthouse Square of Universal, which was used as Hill Valley in Back to the Future. Fun fact.
It's funny because Back to the Future comes up in my episode.
Oh,
my
weird.
Patreon episode.
Oh, weird, because that guy lived in the 1800s.
I know.
All right.
And that's why.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So Dante is known to refer to the film Gremlins as It's a Wonderful Lizard of Oz in Hell, which I think is what I'm going to call this episode.
Oh, yes.
They're called Gremlins in the film based on a line the character Murray Futterman, played by Dick Miller, says. This is a quote, okay? You gotta watch out for foreigners. They put gremlins in the machinery. It's the same gremlins that brought down our planes in the big one. That's right, World War II. Which again seems to harken back to Disney's Gremlins, if you ask me. And Gizmo got his name Gizmo because the crew guys would say, like, bring me that Gizmo. Where's that little Gizmo? Referring to the puppet. So just some fun little origin names. After the first puppet design Wayless did, production gave him some notes. Wayless went back, made another version, and they were like, it's close, keep working. And third time is a charm. His third design is what you see in the movie.
Great.
Similar to Spielberg's E.T., you needed a character to love and root for, i.e. Gizmo.
Gizmo's so cute.
So cute. So that was one of the first changes Spielberg made. Gizmo would not turn into Stripe, as Columbus had originally written. Stripe would be a separate character because he's bad.
I like that. I think I like that.
Yeah. And Spielberg really fell in love with Gizmo. So he calls up the production and he's like, hey, can you make him look like my dog Chauncey? So Chris Wayless, who's already designed the puppet, is like, ugh, I guess. He's like, you don't say no to Spielberg.
He's just like, guys, just roll with it.
Just go with it. Just change everything because I really want it to look like my dog. So this meant changing the creature's coloring to resemble the brown and white fur of good old Chauncey.
Okay.
Wayless said it was an absolute nightmare working on these puppets. They had to make so many of them for the film. Obviously, technology back then wasn't what it is today, so it took a huge crew to operate the little guys, usually up to 7 people on a puppet at a time, which was still better than Joe Dante's original idea. He didn't want to use puppets at first. Instead, he said, why don't we just use monkeys dressed in Gremlins costumes? So one day, they have an animal trainer bring in a rhesus monkey. And they put a gremlin head over this poor monkey's face to test him out. This monkey went
insane.
Ape shit. No pun intended, but a little intended.
I liked it.
He starts running and jumping all over the editing room, pooping everywhere. To which I'm like, what did you expect?
Yeah.
You brought a wild animal into a strange environment and covered his head where he couldn't see anything and didn't know what might happen to him.
Yeah.
So puppets it is, they thought. They had to make so many based on what they needed the puppet to do in a given moment. And they made them in different sizes because they had to build larger versions with huge heads for the close-ups in order to get the puppet to convey the emotions they needed. Just for Gizmo alone, there were about 20 different Gizmo puppets.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and just think of how many gremlins there are in that movie.
That's a ton.
It's a lot.
I mean, it's very well, in my opinion, very well made. Like the puppets, I mean.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the animatronics broke down a lot.
Damn, that sucks.
So you'd have 75 crew members underneath the floor of the set who were supposed to be moving the puppets around, just waiting forever until they could get whatever was broken back up and working again. It was a pain in the ass. And while everyone was waiting around, Zach Galligan, who played Billy, would go into Spielberg's office because he had full-size arcade games in there. And to pass the time, Zach would play Millipede. Spielberg wasn't around the set much because he was busy filming Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So Zach just made himself at home in Spielberg's office.
I mean, when in Rome.
Security was tighter around the puppets than Spielberg's office.
That's crazy.
Like, because the creatures were so expensive and a huge part of a not so huge budget, security would actually check the trunks of crew members' cars at the end of the day to make sure they weren't stealing any of the puppets.
That makes me think that someone tried to lift a gremlin.
I do wonder. Corey Feldman did bring a little tuft of mogwai hair to school one day to be like, "Oh, I have some mogwai hair," and all the kids were like, "What the fuck's a mogwai?" The movie wasn't out yet.
He's like, "Look," and everyone's like, "Who gives a shit?"
They were just like laughing at him. Yeah, poor guy. The crew hated Gizmo because they just had so many puppet problems and it wasted a lot of time. So they made a list titled "Horrible Things to Do to Gizmo." And one of them was to pin him to a dartboard, which is why there's a scene in the movie where Gizmo is pinned to a dartboard.
Aww.
It was a form of catharsis for the crew because they hated him. When it came to casting, production settled on Phoebe Cates pretty much immediately, but Warner Brothers did not want her. Can you guess why?
No, why?
A couple of years prior, she had done Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and in it she has a topless scene.
Boobs.
Boobs.
I haven't seen that movie.
And the studio said, "Scandalous, we can't have a girl like that in our movie."
Shocking. Female bodies.
But the director, Joe Dante, said, "Are you kidding? Like, she's so wholesome." And he was able to convince them to let her be in the movie.
Thank God. She's great.
Yeah. When it came to the role of Billy, they cast relative unknown Zach Galligan. Zach had auditioned with Phoebe Cates prior to this for a different movie and wasn't cast. So when they ran into each other at callbacks for Gremlins, there was already a sense of familiarity there. Zach walks in and sees Phoebe, her hair in ponytail. She's chewing gum. She's looking totally relaxed and cool, not at all nervous. Meanwhile, he's terrified. And she sees him and asks, "Oh, are you trying out for Gremlins?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she pats the chair next to her and she's like, "Sit next to me. Let's read together." So they go over the script in the waiting room, and then the casting director calls them in to read together. Several guys with more experience than Zach were up for the role. Emilio Estevez,
Whoa.
Judd Nelson,
Whoa.
Tom Hanks. Emilio Estevez didn't get it because Spielberg said that he was internalizing everything. Judd Nelson didn't get it because they thought he was too angry. And, well, Tom Hanks just didn't get it. When Spielberg was shown the tape of Phoebe and Zach reading together, there's a moment where Zach puts his head on Phoebe's shoulder and looks straight into the camera. Like, this is when they're in their audition room. And at that point, Spielberg turned to director Joe Dante and producer Michael Fennell and said, "Stop the tape, turn it off." And the guys were like, "Oh, yeah, okay, sure," thinking that he wanted to like discuss something with them.
Yeah.
So they're looking at him expectantly, and Spielberg just stands up and starts to walk out of the room. And Joe and Michael were like, "Wait, what? What is happening?" And Spielberg says, "Oh, he's got the part. He's already in love with her." So that's how he got it. Phoebe did not feel the same way. She said kissing Zach was like kissing her brother. When it came to casting Corey Feldman as Pete, the neighborhood kid, that was Spielberg fulfilling a promise. Feldman was supposed to be in E.T. In the original version of that film, E.T. is discovered by two best friends, one played by Henry Thomas and the other by Corey Feldman. But then rewrites happen and they cut Feldman's character significantly. He was like, I don't know, I think 12 at this point. And it sounds like contracts had already been signed because Spielberg had to call Feldman personally and tell him the bad news. And he said, "Hey, we've changed the idea of the movie, and whatever part you were going to play as the best friend is only going to amount to a day or two on set, which I think would be a waste of your time." He said, "I advise you to withdraw from the role, and I promise if you do, I'll give you a big role in whatever my next film is that has a kid in it."
That's kind of the, best possible outcome in that situation.
Of course. But Feldman was like, "Okay, yeah, right, whatever. I've heard this before. I'll totally put you in my next movie." Nevertheless, he agreed to withdraw, a.k.a. nullify the contract, I'm guessing. And sure enough, when Gremlins rolled around, Spielberg called him up. They also brought Tom Hanks back in to audition for the role of the bank manager, but said he looked too much like Zach Galligan, so that role went to Judge Reinhold.
Tom Hanks really got fucked over in this movie.
Yeah, later, what movie was it that he was on? He went up to them later in a movie. He's like, "You didn't cast me in that. Like, what the fuck?" And they were like, "Sorry, man. Like, it wasn't you."
No, later in the story, you're like, he actually tried out to be one of the Gremlins.
And he just didn't
quite get it.
Just like the crew had experienced problems with the puppets, the cast went through some turmoil of their own on set.
Uh-huh.
There's a scene that takes place in the kitchen where Frances Lee McCain, who plays Billy's mom Lynn, is battling it out with a gremlin. And this gremlin is throwing plates at her. In an article for The Ringer, McCain said, quote, "I wanted to kill the prop guy. He was throwing real plates at me in real time. Yeah, it was crazy, and I was defending myself with a TV tray." So that's all she has in the scene. And these plates are just shattering up against this tray.
I mean, she's badass in that role.
She
she does an amazing job.
If you go back and watch that scene, it hits different knowing that all those plates are real.
She doesn't know where they're coming or when they're coming.
Like if she had missed,
she get a plate to the face.
Yikes. Phoebe Cates dealt with a lot of stuff on set as well. In the scene where the movie theater explodes, the blast actually singed her eyebrows.
Oh my God.
It blew the doors off the theater, which was supposed to happen.
Okay.
But it also caused the windows to shatter on a building a mile away, which was not supposed to happen.
Yeah, that should not happen.
Yeah. She said it was a mile. That could be an exaggeration, but still, windows shattered that weren't meant to.
Yeah.
The cast said the explosion was deafening. Fun fact, the movie all the Gremlins are watching at the theater when it blows up is, do you remember?
I don't remember.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh my God. Callback.
I think it's Dante's homage to Disney, also an Easter egg. It's interesting how he says, oh, I wasn't influenced by Disney's Gremlins, but there's a lot of nods to it.
Of course there are.
A few other Easter eggs. On the marquee of the movie theater earlier in the film are the titles A Boy's Life and Watch the Skies. Those had been working titles for Spielberg's E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And there's a Rockin' Ricky Rialto billboard, which is the exact image coloring look of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh, come on, people.
No, I love those things. I think that's fun. Spielberg even makes an appearance in the science convention scene. He's sitting in a chair while Billy's dad is on the phone. So just a little fun little nods. The scene in Dory's Tavern proved particularly stressful for everyone because the director, Joe Dante, told the crew that anyone who had an idea of what scenarios to put the gremlins in, just say it and they would shoot it. There were so many gremlins in that scene, which meant so many people operating them. It meant that anytime they wanted to put gremlins in a specific situation, they had to build a rig for it. It was a massive undertaking.
Sounds hard.
Yes. And they were using real beer and peanuts and popcorn. And they shot in there for a couple of weeks in the Southern California heat with all those people and all that beer and all that food. It smelled nasty.
Ew.
And it was making Phoebe Cates sick. At one point, as they were setting up a shot, she just screamed at the top of her lungs. And the crew thought she was rehearsing, but then she shouted, "There's a huge fucking cockroach on the counter!" There were cockroaches and rats running all around. It was unpleasant.
I hate that.
Yes. Cates does have a very memorable scene that even while she was making it, she was like, this is going to be huge for me.
Wow.
It's the scene where she gives a monologue about why she hates Christmas.
Yes, I love that.
Yes. It's what, I mean,
so good.
That scene stuck with me as a kid. In the monologue, she talks about how her dad had dressed up as Santa and was trying to come down through the chimney, slipped and broke his neck and died. Chris Columbus originally wrote it for another character that was cut from the film, and Cates really liked the monologue. And the whole idea for the scene came to Columbus from a cartoon he'd seen in Playboy.
Oh.
You can easily find the cartoon online. It's a skeleton wearing a Santa suit lying at the bottom of a fireplace, and these two maintenance men are talking to the homeowner. And one of them says, "Well, we found out what's been clogging your chimney since last December, Miss Emmy."
That's funny.
This scene was a huge point of contention.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg didn't like it.
Really?
But Joe Dante loved it. And he said, you don't know if it's supposed to be tragic or humorous, which is kind of the vibe of our whole movie.
That is. Yeah, exactly.
And Spielberg was like, cool, I trust you. But Warner Brothers said, no way. The first note the studio gave after seeing a cut of the film was, don't cut a frame except take out that speech. Lucy Fisher, that studio rep, liked the scene, but her boss, Bob Daly, did not. He said, it's going to scare people. I just don't like it. So Joe and Bob had a heated meeting, which, according to Lucy, reached a boiling point. Joe, this horror film director, almost starts crying, and he says, it's the whole reason why I wanted to make the movie. Bob said, well, we'll just get Spielberg to make you cut it out. So Warner Brothers goes to Spielberg and says, tell Joe that scene has to go. And Spielberg replies, it's his movie. I don't know what it is he likes about the scene, but it's his movie. Leave it in.
And
so they did.
Yes. Well, of course they did.
Yeah.
Duh. I was really into that story. I was like, what happened? Kate, what happened?
I was like, Kevin, you know we've seen it. I did. I called you by my own name. That's so stupid.
Hi, Misfits. This is Kate.
And this is Kevin. I will say, when I saw it as a kid, like I mentioned, that speech stuck with me. It is definitely memorable. It was scary, but watching it now as an adult, I think it's so hilarious. Funny. Phoebe Cates' delivery is
perfect.
Chef's kiss. Chris Walas, the puppet designer, had a particularly rough go of it while making the movie, and not just because the puppets broke down constantly. One morning, he woke up with a kidney stone, so that had him out of commission for a bit.
Oh, God.
And then while they were shooting the scene where Corey Feldman's character uses a slingshot to shoot at gremlins outside his window, Walas had a cold, and he was on a bunch of cold medication. So he's pretty exhausted, he's a little bit out of it, and he starts walking up these wooden stairs that led to a production trailer on the set, and he missed a step, fell, and broke his ankle.
Oh, my God.
Then one night, he, along with the director and the DP, were working on a shot with a puppet that was taking forever. And it was a late night. The crew had already been there all day. It was a long day. So production ordered pizza for everyone. Wayless and the other two guys were like, awesome, we just need to finish this shot. And then when they finally did, they were like, great, we're exhausted, we're starving, let's have pizza. But by then, the rest of the crew had already eaten it all. There was nothing left. So the guys walk in to just empty tables, and they were like, yep, this tracks. And Joe Dante said, that sums up our whole experience on this film.
Oh, man.
When Warner Brothers saw the film, they did not like it.
Hated it. Hated it.
They didn't understand what this movie was. Yeah. And they hated the Gremlins. They thought they were gross. They kept complaining to Spielberg and said, you need to cut a bunch of these Gremlins from the film. There's too many. So Spielberg replied, well, let's just cut all of them and call the movie People. A lot of credit goes to Spielberg for trusting his team.
I'm kind of obsessed with him being a champion for this movie.
He put trust in his people, and that makes all the difference.
And I think he knew. And this movie is a classic for a reason.
He had complete faith in his director, and he knew his name had some weight. He wasn't just going to bend to the studio's every demand.
No.
But even Joe Dante and Michael Fennell were like, is anyone going to get this? Or are they just going to think these creatures look ridiculous?
I mean, they do. But that's the point. I thought that was...
Yeah. The film was intended to be released at Christmas, but Warner Brothers wanted something to go up against Ghostbusters, so it had a June release.
Okay.
And people did get it. It was made on a budget of $11 million and has grossed over $212 million worldwide.
See?
It's not without its criticisms, however.
Course.
After the film's release, as we were mentioning before, parents complained it was too violent for kids. It was advertised as Steven Spielberg Presents Gremlins, and it was coming on the heels of E.T. And this movie's poster was even the same coloring as E.T. and looked kind of similar. So people thought, oh, it's a cute movie with a little fuzzy guy. Plus, it was rated PG. So parents were upset. It was because of this and a similar feeling the public had about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which also came out at this time, that the rating PG-13 was created. They needed something between PG and R.
Oh, this movie did that?
We have Gremlins to thank for that.
Oh, my God. Also, just to put in there, you know that scene where the old lady's in the chair and she flies up and out the window? I keep seeing TikTok videos of that scene, but it's the wicked, it's me, like as she's flying.
Yes. And actually he did. So that part of the Wicked Witch in Wizard of Oz, influenced that particular.
Are you
like
serious?
it's meant to
evoke that.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Some groups, back to the criticisms, some groups say the movie is all about sex, with the Gremlins representing Billy's sexual desires. And if one doesn't follow the rules, it can lead to unplanned pregnancies, i.e., you get a gremlin wet and it multiplies.
Ew. What?
That's what
Kate.
they say.
Sex Gremlins.
Sex Gremlins.
That's the name of a band. Kate and the Sex Gremlins.
I think it's just Sex Gremlins.
Yeah. We're going to do that.
Okay.
I'm going to play the clarinet. Kate's going to play the drums.
What an interesting choice for Sex Gremlins. The clarinet.
That's all I know how to play.
Complex Magazine argued that the movie uses gremlins to represent the fear white people have about black people, making the comparison that white people view black people as, quote, loud, breakdancing little monsters who devour fried chicken at an unprecedented pace.
Oh.
And that's why Complex put them on their list of 50 most racist movies. Yep. Because gremlins eat fried chicken in the film.
Okay.
That's literally what I wrote in response. I was just like, okay. But it's not the first time that criticism has been made about the film.
Okay.
There was an essay written by Professor Patricia Turner in 1987 titled Real Blacks, real as in R-E-E-L, where she says that Gizmo's malevolent offspring, and this is a quote, seem to reflect negative Afro-American stereotypes.
Okay.
I don't think that is the intention of the movie, but...
Well, and that's the thing, though. Like,
I mean, everyone's going to interpret things differently.
Exactly. A lot of people will take those interpretations and those symbols and relate them to their own experience, or their own lived experiences. I don't want to say that it's reaching, but yeah, I don't know that that's like the main theme.
Some view the film as a metaphor for the Vietnam War, which isn't a huge stretch.
Okay.
You've got Americans disrespecting an Eastern culture's boundaries, causing a lot of people to die. At the end of the movie, Mr. Wing, the Chinese shop owner, reclaims Gizmo and condemns Billy and his father, saying, you, as in Americans and Western culture, have done with Mogwai what your society has done with all of nature's gifts.
Whoa.
And they keep doing it because the movie spawned a sequel and an animated series.
Yeah.
Fun fact, Gremlins was the first film to use the Amblin Entertainment logo, the one with the silhouette of Henry Thomas riding his bike with E.T. across the sky with the moon in the background.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And this is neither here nor there, but when The Mandalorian came out, Joe Dante complained that Disney had ripped off the look of Grogu, Baby Yoda, from Gizmo. Grogu is based off of Yoda, which was a character that had already been created before Chris Columbus ever even wrote the script Gremlins.
Joe, you can't just say that every little cute creature is a ripoff of yours.
Well, technically, like, they kind of ripped it off Disney. You know what I'm saying?
I
like,
get that, yeah.
It's a weird thing because there's so many nods to Disney in the film, and then he's like, Disney ripped me off. No. And what's interesting is that Joe Dante had actually ripped off Jaws with his movie Piranha.
Oh, he did Piranha. I forgot about that.
And
I like that movie.
Rather than Spielberg being like, what the hell? Spielberg was like, hey, I see what you're doing. And let's work together.
Like, what's the intersection between ripoff and paying homage to?
Sure. Everyone steals from everyone in the creative industry. Everything is
everything.
An interpretation of something else.
When I did my master's, that was the thing. They were like, when they first told us, they're like, obviously, like, don't straight out copy someone's work, but if there's something that inspires you as a type of performance or something of value that you want to do, to take something that already exists and to add and put your own spin on it is of value as well.
Yeah. Baby Yoda is not Gizmo. Once Zach Galligan had completed filming, he was back living on the second floor of an apartment in Manhattan, and one day he hears the freight elevator at his back door go ding. So he gets up and he opens it up, and there's this guy with this huge box standing there. And he's like, you Zach Galligan? And Zach says, yeah. And the guy says, sign here and here, initial here. And then he brings this giant box into Zach's kitchen. And when Zach opened it, it was the millipede machine. And a card inside read, guess you like this more than I do, Steven.
Oh, that's cute.
Bonus points, Kevin, if you can name the celebrity who did the speaking voice of Gizmo.
Well, it's like this little like. Was it a female?
The speaking voice was not. His singing voice is.
Okay.
But the speaking voice is not.
I don't know.
I'm going to give you 3 hints.
Okay, give me a hint.
Game show, bald, germaphobe. Those are pretty good hints.
When you said bald game show host, I thought Steve Harvey.
Well, you're not super far off.
Really? Is it a Steve?
No. Howie Mandel.
Howie Mandel. Are you fucking kidding me?
No. But you don't get the bonus points.
Sex Gremlins.
Sex Gremlins. That's the story of Gremlins.
That was so much fun.
How it came to be, some behind the scenes stuff.
How it was, how it is, and how it will be.
They are still trying to make a Gremlins 3.
Really?
Yeah.
I would love that. And don't CGI them.
I think it'll always be practical.
It kind of has to be.
So let us know what you thought. You can let us know in the comments on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or Spotify at
Horrorwood Podcast.
Or you can send us an email at
sexgremlins@ymail.com. No, I'm kidding.
Don't email that address.
Don't do it. I don't know what that is. You can email us at horrorwoodpodcast@gmail.com. Everything's leaving my mind right now.
Yeah, that espresso really
It fucked me up.
took you up and then brought you crashing down. If you would like to be like if you'd like to be like Lisa Carmichael and join the Patreon right here at the holidays, oh my gosh, we would love it. It would be amazing. You can do that at
patreon.com/horrorwoodpodcast.
Happy Horrorwood holidays, everybody. Don't do murder and never feed a mogwai after midnight.
I love that ending. This is fabulous.
Yay.
Happy holidays.